In a world filled with cringy Korean integration into Western media, Kpop Demon Hunters is the masterclass on how to integrate Korean heritage with pop culture. Of course, there will be spoilers, but let's get into it. In current pop culture, when you think about South Korea, you mainly think about K-pop, K-dramas, hanboks, and other very popular traditional items. And while you may think of these ancient traditions, you don't really think about the history of South Korea as a whole. So as your resident history major, here are some things I noticed about Kpop Demon Hunters as a non-Korean. Off the bat, let's talk about the concept of huntrix. Huntrix, or more broadly, the general hunter groups, were really interesting to me because of the number of members they had in the group. A trio is actually very unconventional when it comes to K-pop girl groups, with most being the minimum of 4, ranging up to 24. So why 3? Well, if you actually know about the history of K-pop, then 3 makes a lot of sense. Many historians argue that K-pop began in the 1950s with 3 girls, the Kim sisters. Although not actually sisters, the Kim sisters brought Korean music into America during the 50s. Now we know from the beginning of the movie that the Demon Hunters have been striving for this golden honeymoon since the Joseon era. Therefore, it makes perfect sense to me to believe the Kim sisters are canonically a demon hunter group as well. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is them. I just thought this was a really clever nod to the history of K-pop in which many people would not know. Because really, if it wasn't for these Kim sisters, we wouldn't have the globalization that we have today. Another thing we were introduced to at the beginning of the film is the Huntrix's obsession with ramyeon. Not ramen, but ramyeon. Now, you might be wondering what's actually the difference, and in terms of the food they're eating, not much. However, if that was the case, why wouldn't Koreans call it ramen like us Americans would call it ramen when referring to the Japanese dish? While yes, ramen is a Japanese dish, it is important to remember that Korea was under Japanese rule for a very, very long time. And in that regard, they have adopted this noodle dish as their own, thus making it ramyeon instead of ramen. It's a subtle nod to Korean history that may not have a major impact. However, I thought it was really special because it creates that important distinction between this being just another Asian-oriented film versus a Korean film. Now, another thing I don't see a lot of people talk about is the Hanmun itself. The globalization of modern K-pop is known as Hallyu. It's also known as the Hallyu wave. And when we look at the Hanmun, every time it appears in this wave-like motion. I believe that is in reference to the Hallyu wave. Now let's talk about my favorite characters of the entire film, the tiger and the magpie. While the tiger's mannerism is modeled after the creator's cat, its character design is more than just a derpy face and adorable yet stupid comic relief. In fact, the tiger's design is very similar to how they drew tigers back in the Joseon and ancient era. I'm gonna put a picture of the tigers here, but as you can see, they both have these huge eyes, crooked smiles, and fangs sticking out. And even in some paintings, the tiger is depicted with a magpie, which is why we know that that bird is in fact a magpie. Even in this photo, the magpie has the same similar circular design as the one in the film. Now, if there's any correlation onto why the bird has 6 eyes, you're gonna need to tell me. Regardless, I really appreciate this subtle nod to Korean art and the introduction of this old school style of painting in this very modern-esque style of animation. It also makes perfect sense why they look the way they do, considering they're Jinu's companion, and we know Jinu was alive during the Joseon era. Overall, the main theme of the story is to accept yourself in your entirety. While I've seen many people interpret this as a queer or Asian identity to accept, I actually believe this is more so on the idea of being part of 2 worlds and finding the balance in between both of them. And maybe it's because I am Asian American that I view that this is what the theme is, but I think there are strong arguments on how the story can relate to being Korean American. One of the most outright examples we see of this is Zoey, one of the huntrix. She is Korean American in all of the sense. And she quite literally sings about this issue in Golden, how she's torn in between these 2 worlds of Burbank, California and South Korea. Same can be said about Rumi, in which she was born into two heritages, the huntress and the demons. And we can see a lot of this conflict comes from her feeling like she needs to choose one side, the hunter side, over her demon side, whereas at the end we see her embrace both sides. Mira also has elements of trying to find a place where she belongs, just like the other girls. Additionally, I think this ties in beautifully with the voice actors themselves. Huntress are voiced by a bunch of Korean Americans, whether that means they were born and raised in America or they were born in Korea and grew up here. Additionally, even the voice actor of Jinu, the main guy in Saja Boys, is Korean Canadian. So if anyone knows about being a part of two different worlds, it is definitely these actors. And I just love how they subtly included that into the film. Now that the mini video essay is done with, let's go into a little bit of fangirling. Because I've been in love with An Hyo-seop since Business Proposal, and I watched The Lovers of the Red Sky, and this is like the best of both worlds for me. While Andrew Cho was the singing voice of Jin-yu, An Hyo-seop actually sang the beginning line that we hear when we were first introduced to the character in the demon world. He's really putting that JYP GOT7 training into use, and I just wish he sang a little bit more. And of course, this part's my favorite part of the whole film.
Okay, so I've been meaning to ask, why does the bird wear a tiny hat?
I made it for the tiger, but the bird keeps taking it.
It's been playing on repeat in my mind since I watched the film. And while I have many ideas on what to do with the prequel/sequel, this video is about interpreting what we are given. I love this film for many reasons, but one of them is because of how refreshing it is. The director of Kpop Demon Hunters said it took 9 years to produce, and I can really see it in the quality of the storytelling and the animation. And let's talk about the animation, because I love this style of animation. But what can you expect from Sony Animation Studios? The topic of diverse films, this is how you do a diverse film. You don't simply put a person of color as your main character just for the sake of having a person of color. Instead, this film cannot exist if it wasn't for the Korean characters, as it wouldn't make sense if there was any other race playing those characters. You can really tell the director understands what they were doing in the whole process. Overall, I watched it like twice already, and I'll probably go watch it like another 2 times this week. Thank you so much for watching and agreeing to watch along with my little geeking out moment of all of the stuff I noticed from Kpop Demon Hunters. Obviously, I probably missed a lot, so if you catch something I didn't, please let me know in the comments. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.